Welcome to Press Coverage. I'm Theo Gremminger. Repeat guest today. I've got Davis Mattek in the house. NFL season is right around the corner. This is absolutely peak drafting season for many of you. Some of you are going to be drafting tonight. So we're going to try to get some players that we see as risers, guys who are moving up draft boards that you should make a part of your draft plan. But before we do that, Davis, what do you have going on these days? You're kind of everywhere dropping the contract. I saw like a Patreon tweet today. Like you're crushing it.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's we are 17 days when you and I are recording this right now to the beginning of the season. So I'm gonna try. I'm not gonna make 100% promise, but I'm gonna try to stream every day on my YouTube channel from now until the beginning of the season. I'll pretty much be updating rankings every single day over on my Patreon. I just did my redraft tiers. So that's like your home league and honestly, and high stakes. Like my home league is honestly harder than the FFPC main event. Truly. That sounds insane, but it's not. The FFPC main event, once you account for the tight end premium stuff, drafts a lot like a home league. Like running backs go earlier than they should. Quarterbacks go earlier than they should. I really think that is the case. So just Theo, we're just out here grinding, man.
Yeah, 100% out here grinding. And I'll agree with you. Like some of these home leagues, you get these cutthroat people that are like known for years. They know your tendencies. There's a lot of hidden animosity, some passive aggressiveness in these draft rooms, people sniping each other. So big respect. I know a lot of times we talk about FFPC, NFFC this time of year, but yeah, a lot of respect to these home leagues drafts. I do think you can find some edges when you get in certain home leagues based on the default ADPs, but depending on how sharp your league mates are, that thing sort of goes out the window. But I specifically want to talk to you, Davis, because you're drafting a lot. I'm drafting a lot. And I don't know about you, but when I get my FFPC or NFFC draft slots, I'm thrilled when I'm not in the 11 and 12 hole. And if I talked to you 2 months ago, I was sort of into the 1-2 turn. But what we've seen recently is with the Jahmyr Gibbs injury, the Puka Nacua injury, those guys we think will be there for week 1, but we never like drafting guys that are a little bit banged up. Both of those guys have sort of slid into the second round. And then a couple of the very appealing wide receivers like A.J. Brown and Garrett Wilson, those guys are almost never, ever available at the 12 spot. Occasionally at the 11, but not really ever at the turn. And 2 months ago, you could have gotten those guys at 12, 13. You could have had both of them on the same team. How are you handling a bad draft slot, able to adjust to a slot that's challenging? Let's start out with FFPC.
Well, at the 3-4 turn, or at the 3-4 turn is more the problem actually than the 1-2 turn. You're gonna like who you're able to take at the 1-2 turn. I mean, it could be Puka and Marv, could be Garrett Wilson, and it's more of a half PPR thing, but you don't have to take Debo there. But basically, 2 wide receivers almost 100% of the time. Maybe you could take McBride. Maybe you could take Laporta. It's a little bit early, but obviously it helps you structurally. The 3-4 turn ends up being a bigger problem where if someone really leaps on Debo or DJ Moore or Kyle Pitts is not there, you're in more trouble. There generally will be a running back you're fine taking at 35 and at 38, which is really a reason to not take Gibbs, a reason to not take Jonathan Taylor. So I completely agree with you. If I get the draft email and I'm like, oh, you're picking at 12, I'm like, shit, I just spent $2,000 or whatever to pick 12. That is not very fun.
What do you think about the people in FFPC who are going bang, bang tight ends at the 12 spot? Sometimes you're seeing a Sam Laporta, Trey McBride, a Sam Laporta, Travis Kelce start. It used to be contrarian, and I could understand that when people weren't doing it. Now I'd say it's almost every other draft, every third draft. Do you think that that's a viable strategy?
I don't. I think it's almost for sure suboptimal because the way you can think of it is, the second tight end is just counting as my wide receiver points. I do this a lot, more kind of back when ADP used to be a little bit softer, but we'll take Mark Andrews and then we'll take whoever happens to be the tight end 9, and then Mark Andrews, you think of Mark Andrews as the wide receiver and the tight end 9 as your tight end. And it's conceptually, I still kind of get it. But the wide receivers, even in tight end premium, are just going to score so much more. Like even tight end premium scoring, compare I mean, we're 17 days away. Go pull up your favorite website's projections and compare what Mark Andrews is projected for or what Sam Laporte is projected for in week 1 compared to Drake London. Like Drake London's going to be like 4 points better, like way better. And I think you're just giving up too much to double tap there.
You're also sort of dead in the water if those guys finish as tight end 6, tight end 5. Like, it doesn't sound like a huge loss, but you're really betting on your ability to identify tight end 1 overall and tight end 2 overall. And oftentimes that's not the top 2 tight ends drafted at ADP. So I'm with you. So in terms of you're mixing it up, what about when we get to NFFC? NFFC, for anybody not familiar with the format, you're talking about you have to start 3 wide receivers every week and a flex. So there's no tight end premium. To give an example, like Laporta goes like at the end of the 3rd round in some of those NFFC drafts. So you're getting a huge, like, people kind of discounting tight ends in general. Are you more likely to go wide receiver in NFFC builds?
I mean, 100%. 100%, especially because like you can get, like I did one already where we got Brock Bowers in the 10th round, which is crazy. And even some of the guys that like the NFFC drafters, they're kind of boomer over there sometimes. Like A-Chain is like a 3rd round pick there. Joe Mixon goes like 20 spots ahead of Kenneth Walker. Like there are just some weird discrepancies there. I believe I've done 2. I know I've done 2 online championships already. And I think in both of them, we did not take a running back until the 6th round, I believe. Like it's kind of the way, not that I am saying I don't want a running back. Like, don't get me wrong. If the running back is the best player on my board, I'm going to take him, but I'm not going to sacrifice my wide receiver depth just to take a Jonathan Taylor at 18th overall. Like even if you pick 6th or whatever, like I'm not taking Jonathan Taylor over one of these super high ceiling wide receivers.
NFFC, you also get the 3rd round reversal when you're picking at the end of the draft. So you're picking at 25 overall, and at 25 overall in that format, you're going to have access to multiple running backs, or you can go with a 3rd wide receiver there that's still appealing. So yeah, I'm with you. It's kind of less of a headache to get that 12 spot in the NFFC these days, but it's still not ideal at all.
It's not ideal.
Let's take a quick break. We're going to talk about a number of players that have been rising up, guys we think should be considerations in your drafts as early as tonight. Some of these players you're going to have to pay a lot more than you did a month ago, and in some of these cases, it doesn't matter. You're still going to want them on your team. We'll be right back.
Oh, it's the Podfather, and last year's fastest growing fantasy platform is back. It's Smash Up Fantasy. They've got these leagues where you redraft your team every week and you get smarter as the season progresses. Now, Smash Up also has a patented power-up card. These are actual cards that can boost your individual players or your entire team. So if you think Lamar Jackson's going to run wild all over the Kansas City Chiefs in week 1, play the Scramble Spikes Smash Up card to turbocharge his rushing points. And that's not all. Smash Up also is introducing the world's first single-player fantasy game. Think Street Fighter meets fantasy football, where you can go toe-to-toe versus an increasingly difficult fantasy football boss and qualify for the postseason tournament of champions. So test your skills against me, the Podfather, and the Player Profiler team today at smashupsports.com and use code PlayerProfiler. The code is Player Profiler to get special perks like extra lineups for these weekly tournaments and so much more. And it's all free at smashupsports.com.
Welcome back to Press Coverage. Theo Gremminger with Davis Mattek. Davis, Matt mentioned Lamar Jackson in that. Just curious how you're playing the free look. In both of these formats, you have a free look situation where anybody in play on Thursday and Friday can be subbed out of the lineup. Is there any edges that you're utilizing? A couple of players you love to maybe draft in the end of the 20th round? Are you hitting the kickers or defenses? Does it sort of change your draft style in the last few rounds with the free looks in multiple games?
I think it's the Packers wide receivers have to be the ones that this applies to most. I mean, we've got a pretty good idea what the Eagles offense is going to look like. We've got a pretty good idea what the Ravens offense is going to look like. Maybe the Ravens could surprise us with a third wide receiver. Maybe Devontae Walker actually is a starter. I mean, unlikely, but possible. The Chiefs are probably not going to have Hollywood Brown. So I guess maybe CEH plays more than we think, but pretty much it's Dobbs, Wicks, Melton, Jayden Reed, Christian Watson. Like Melton is probably the one where you take him in round 20 and be like, well, if he just doesn't play, then I'll cut him. But this is some good trivia for the press coverage listeners. You know who the first wide receiver to have a 100-yard receiving game for the Green Bay Packers in 2023 was Bo Melton in week 16. He was the first wide receiver to have 100. I mean, he seems like he's kind of down the depth chart right now, like even more than he was last year, but all of those Packers wide receivers, I'm clicking them a couple spots early because one of them is going to score like 27 points against the Eagles, and I'd like to put that guy in my lineup with the free peak.
So at the time we're recording this, we're officially 16 days away from FFPC NFFC Saturday, where both of these games will be known. We always see a riser. Sometimes we see 5 risers, and we always see fallers. Which player is going to be the draft riser that in these high stakes formats has such a good game on Thursday or Friday that somebody's like willing to push him up a round or two?
I mean, it's definitely Wicks. Wicks scores a 47-yard touchdown against some poor, mismatched Eagles defensive back where I actually, Theo, the other night in the main event, me and Pete and Pat and Ben set the min pick on Dontayvion Wicks. We are the first drafters of Dontayvion Wicks in the main event.
That must have been a special moment for you, Davis, because Davis, when you came on Dynasty Life, predicted that Dontayvion Wicks is going to lead Green Bay in PPR scoring ahead of Josh Jacobs, ahead of all the wide receivers. So like you love seeing that touchdown in the preseason. He looked so good on that one. What did you guys set the min pick on? Well, you don't have to give me the exact one, but what round was it?
It was not. It was the 9th pick of the 9th round. So 9. What it was that? Was that pick 100? I think.
Sounds about right. Sounds about right.
So there we go.
Let's stay with Dontayvion Wicks, and he's obviously on the list. You just painted a big bull picture, but there's going to be people pushing back and saying this situation seems too crowded for me. There's too many mouths to feed. There's Christian Watson's healthy. Jayden Reed, look what he did last year. Is it a situation where it's a Price is Right situation for you with Dontayvion Wicks, or is it this guy's the real deal and he's just being sort of discounted by the teammate competition and maybe his NFL draft capital?
I mean, I definitely think that he's priced in the right order. Like he should be the 4th Packers wide receiver drafted. There's actually a pretty convincing argument to me that Dobbs might be the one that's actually the most underdrafted, but there are just so many ways for Wicks to get there. The first one being he just runs more routes than anyone thinks, right? So if Watson and Reed don't combine for more than 70% of the routes individually, and Dobbs runs about 80% of the routes, I mean, you've already got 60% of the routes right there. Like without even putting a guy on the bench or an injury, you've just got him rotating in, right? Then you've got Watson hamstring. Jayden Reed is an undersized guy who's playing in this like kind of Debo role where he's getting tackled a lot. He actually missed time with injury last year. And then you've got Dobbs sucks outs where he just replaces Dobbs on the outside. Not even saying any of those in and of themselves are particularly likely, but the combined probability of any of those guys missing time, Wicks just outplaying one of them and sending them to the bench, or maybe they just manage Watson's routes. They just say, we think you're really good and we want you to play, but we don't think you are going to be able to stay healthy running 80% of the routes. So let's run you 50% of the routes. And that right there gets Wicks to being a full-time player, basically.
Yeah, I agree with you. He does have a lot of outs, and we did see it last year. We like the coach speak where LaFleur has singled him out. And these are the kind of situations we want to bet on where we're getting discounts on guys. Even if you disagree with Davis on this one, I think there's an argument for taking a stand on at least one of these Green Bay wide receivers and just taking a shot on them in your drafts. It could be
Yeah,
Christian
you
Watson,
definitely like you should think I'm wrong if you're like, no, Dobbs is way undervalued. I mean, you should be jamming Dobbs because Jordan Love is legit. LaFleur is like this really good, Shanahan level play caller. The offense is going to be very good. You should be taking one of these guys more than the field.
Yeah, no, 100%. And then I was surprised you actually. I know you talked about Dontayvion Wicks and it's become on brand for you as a riser, but could we see Xavier Worthy in like the 4th round, the night after he gets behind the Baltimore defense? Could this be we'll go back in time. It's actually you mentioned Hollywood Brown, but you could have a Hollywood Brown like debut game. Anybody who remembers Hollywood Brown's debut, the guy had like 2 long touchdowns. It was incredible. With Xavier Worthy, I drafted him in the 6th round on an FFPC main event this week. The days of him in the 7th are sort of like, you could still get him there, but I think he's going to settle into the 6th round. But could he be a guy that just blows people away this year and is the best rookie ADP value at the wide receiver spot?
I mean, I think I'm sort of leaning towards that being like the most likely thing now. Because the issue you would have with Worthy would be, they got to run out Watson and Tony and Sky Moore because those guys know the offense, and Worthy can't beat press cover. And it's like Reed has pretty much always already said like it's over, man. Like Worthy is ran every drop back that Mahomes has had in the preseason, but one Worthy has ran a route on. He scored the 39-yard touchdown from Wentz. Like it's basically like Deshaun Jackson is playing with Patrick Mahomes. I mean, that is obvious. Like that's a lot of hyperbole, but you could call me biased, like whatever, but I don't see how fantasy football gets simpler than the Chiefs are super frustrated with how close to the line of scrimmage they had to play last year. They sign Hollywood Brown. They draft the fastest guy in the history of the combine, and they say, we're throwing the ball deep. Like we are over checking it down. You just want to have those guys.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I've also been drafting Rashee Rice, and he's been coming up. Curious your take on, we know you're bullish on Hollywood. Rice is somebody you've got to draft now close to the 4-5 turn. I drafted him at the 507, but I've also drafted him at like the 411 when you're kind of stuck. I'm into him. Are you also into drafting Rashee Rice at his value?
Yeah, I'm into all of them. I mean, a little bit less into Rice as time goes on, as he gets more expensive. I think if he gets past Diggs and Dell, I might be like, well, because the thing is I'm so high on Worthy that I think the like 111 reception, 10 touchdown season for Rice becomes like exponentially less likely as Worthy begins to earn more targets effectively. But it's hard to be out on any of them. Really, it's hard for me to be out on any Chief given my basic kind of how people feel about the Texans. This is how I feel about the Chiefs, where I'm just like, there's a crazy season in these guys' range of outcomes.
The Chief that I might be out on, especially in FFPC, and I think I am out on him. I haven't clicked the button once, is Travis Kelce, because Travis Kelce, I have to use this insane draft capital on a guy whose points per game dropped 4 points per game last year. And now you have all this target competition. When Hollywood Brown comes back, especially, you could have potential for 3 wide receivers that are going to command targets. I'm out on Kelce there. Have you been adding Kelce shares at cost, or is it specifically a best ball click for you?
All right, so we did one slow main event. Well, maybe this was a fast. I don't remember. I've got him on one of 6 teams thus far, and we did take him ahead of Laporta. There was dissension in the ranks amongst my co-managers on that one. I definitely wanted to have him on at least one. Like doing an entire season of main events and high stakes leagues where you've got none of the guy who, like, let's say this, Theo, if I told you he's not resting, the Chiefs are trying to set every record in the book, they're pissed off, Mahomes wants to win MVP again, you'd be like, oh, well, he's a first round pick. But the issue is we just don't know. I mean, we really don't know if they're 15-1. Kelce might not be playing in the fantasy playoffs. Like they clearly made an effort to kind of save him last year until the playoffs. There are two big differences, though. The first one being Kelce himself was like not hurt, but he was injured. So he was carrying the leg injury and he was carrying an ankle injury. And he was so beat up that he chose not to try and get 16 yards in week 18 of the season. That to me is like such a tell it was 8 straight 1,000-yard seasons. And he basically said, like, coach, I can't do it. Like, I am too beat up to go and get 16 yards in this game, which to me is like, you could read that one of two ways. You can read that as in last year was the outlier and he'll be better this year. Or you read it the other way and you say, well, if he was beat up last year, how beat up is he going to be this year? They're going to use him even less. And I don't have the answer, but you definitely have to decide one way or the other.
Yeah, and I think you kind of nailed it where you're doing like 6 entries in one league. If you have that much exposure, I think maybe you get a little Kelce in there. But I think if it's one single draft, I definitely would be off of them. But yeah, keep drafting those Chiefs wide receivers. And let's go a quick ADP head-to-head. Rashee Rice is next to T. Higgins and Zay Flowers. Which way are you going? Rice over those two guys?
I do, in my rankings, have T. Higgins literally 1 spot ahead of Rashee Rice, and I have Flowers 1 spot behind Rashee Rice. So, I mean, truth serum on the clock, like I probably do want to take Rashee. It kind of depends on the context of the team, though. Like, I like setting up Burrow in FFPC ADP. It benefits passers a little bit more. Same for NFFC, actually. It's 6 points per passing touchdown. And Burrow is kind of the cheapest expensive quarterback, if that makes sense. Like you can get him like round 8, round 9 sometimes. And
round 10 sometimes for Joe Burrows right now. It's
and that's a good spot.
Yeah.
So it just kind of depends on what you want to do. It depends on how many high stakes leagues are you doing. Are you doing 1? Are you doing 10? If you're doing 1, I think you just take Rashee because he's got a crazy season in his range of outcomes. If you're doing 10, it kind of depends, but you probably, if you're doing 10, you want to have 1 Burrow team. I mean, right? Like you want to be exposing yourself to that situation.
Now, level of conviction on Xavier Worthy, I kind of know which way you're going to go, but he's next to 2 wide receiver 1s on bad teams.
Yeah.
And also Chris Godwin, who's sort of rejuvenated in a Cooper Kupp-like role on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers back in the slot. So it's Calvin Ridley, Deontay Johnson, Chris Godwin. Are you taking any of those 3 ahead of Xavier Worthy?
No. I've
Okay.
got Xavier Worthy ranked wide receiver 30 in my ranks. He was wide receiver 34 before Hollywood injured his shoulder. But I just, in an environment where Daniel Jones is wide receiver 1 is going in the second round, it's like, no shade to Malik Neighbors. He's a great player. If Malik Neighbors went to a different situation, he might be going ahead of Marvin Harrison Jr. They both might be 1-2 turn picks, yeah, I've taken Worthy ahead of those guys 10 times out of.
Yeah, I'm really want a lot more Xavier Worthy. And if you're a dynasty manager, I would kick the tires on some Worthy trades now because I think he's going to gain some dynasty value as the season starts. Let's talk about Cooper Kupp, though. We're starting to see him steam up where he's gone by the mid-3rd in every draft, and you're starting to see some conviction from drafters trying to push him up. I saw in an NFFC league where he went like 13th overall. I saw last night in an FFPC main event that I drafted with Scott Barrett and a B-Bag Batoba, Cooper Kupp went at the 207. So the steam is there. He's a guy that definitely deserves to move up. You got the Puka Nacua being banged up. You've got Cooper Kupp looking like his old self. The media reports saying that he is the wide receiver 1 there. So there's all sorts of, and also him playing in an exceptional amount of pain last year was something that I don't think we had the full knowledge on at the time. So everything's sort of lining up for a big bounce back. But my question to you is, at what point does he become too expensive in ADP where you have trouble clicking that button?
That's a good question. I mean, honestly, isn't there an argument that there really isn't a way that he gets too expensive? Like, again, it's kind of like the Kelce thing. If I told you you're getting 2021 health Cooper Kupp, like he hasn't lost a step, the hamstring feels fine, I don't know. I mean, there's an argument to take him ahead of Puka. Now, obviously, I don't think I would do that for like combinatorial uniqueness reasons. But I've been ahead of the market on Kupp the whole way. Now he's actually kind of to where I believe this whole time I've had him as my wide receiver 15, 16. So like even kind of ahead of like Devontae Adams and stuff. I mean, he wasn't even bad when he came back from he wasn't like capital, all capital letters Cooper Kupp, but it's not like he was terrible. It's not like one of these Larry Fitzgerald seasons where it was like he was out there but just couldn't get open anymore. I mean, I don't know. I feel like 2.27 or whatever in a main. I mean, honestly, I feel like it's fine.
Yeah, and I think the argument being where once you have the Harrison Jr. and London picks off the board, it's sort of like a flat, like very appealing wide receivers. But I think like especially if I missed on wideout in the first round, I'm good with Kupp. I do want to have a little bit more wide receiver depth when I take Cooper Kupp at that range, just because of his age. So it does change a little structurally, but I've had a couple of builds now where I start out with 3 wide receivers and I get Kupp in round 3. Like, I feel like that's super dangerous. And we've got to remember Puka Nacua was fantastic last year, but this is a guy who had injury concerns in college as well. And it's a knee. So even if he plays week 1, this is not, you never like to hear about a knee in the summer. But let's go a little further down the list on the Rams. Kyron Williams, day 3 pick. Puka Nacua, day 3 pick. And now Jordan Whittington, day 3 pick, looks awesome. Sean McVay is talking him up. We've seen it in 2 preseason games. This is a guy where
that's the tell, though. That's the tell. He didn't rest in preseason week 2. That's pretty big. I mean, not to say McVay's not going to play him, but that is a pretty big tell for McVay, in my opinion.
Yeah, I guess that's fair. That if he was locked in, you would have seen him been seated. Maybe devil's advocate is they want to see him in more of a can he handle a role where he's continually being featured in this offense. That
Absolutely.
could be kind of the counter argument. But do you think that there is an argument that you almost treat him as a handcuff when you draft Puka or draft Kupp? Because I've seen people doing that. I've started to mix it in where I've done it when I draft either of the Rams. I'm drafting Whittington, but I'm also taking him in the 15th round because why not? He looks really good, and this is a coach that we've seen multiple like guys come out of nowhere and excel. Your thoughts on how you should treat him in your process?
I mean, I definitely like taking him, and I think he's like really, he's probably even a better pick in manage than in best ball, because if it turns out we're just wrong and he never plays, then you can just cut him. If he's getting like 4 routes per game, like if he's just Ben Skowronek or whatever, yeah, you can just cut him and move on. It just basically doesn't matter. So the reason why I'm really like taking him though is I am not I just think there's no reason for Demarcus Robinson to be getting drafted in 20. Like we know who Demarcus Robinson is. He's played with Patrick Mahomes and Lamar Jackson and Matthew Stafford. He had that nice run where he kept scoring touchdowns last year, but he's got 2 100-yard games in an 8-year NFL career, playing with nothing but literally 4 years he's played. He's had 3 years he's played. He's had a quarterback who won the MVP. We just don't got to take him. So the deal with Whittington is he kept getting hurt at Texas. He would get promoted. He'd start. He started a Red River rivalry. I think he had like 3 receptions for 70 yards in a game against Oklahoma, and then he got hurt, couldn't come back for a month. And if you're at Texas and you're hurt, guess what? There's a 5-star recruit who's right behind you. That 5-star recruit might be Xavier Worthy. That 5-star recruit might be A.D. Mitchell, who transferred from Georgia. It might be 5-star recruit Jatavian Sanders. Oh, you're injured? Guess what? Jonathan Brooks is there. You're injured? Guess what? Bijan Robinson's there. So he's a real hard prospect to evaluate, but I think he can probably play.
Yeah, he looks like Puka Nacua with dreads out there in the preseason. So we're kind of rooting on him. He seems also like a guy where it could create some chaos in a lot of these builds if he is really good and sort of a tilting kind of player. So a great storyline, and something needs to be studied on how the Rams continually seem to hit with these late round picks. They didn't have first rounders for years, but they keep doing it. Let's talk about another guy that's been sort of buried for 2 years in Dallas, but now has a window, and that's Jalen Tolbert. Is this the year he overtakes Brandon Cooks? Some positive buzz right now.
I started out being pretty low on Jalen Tolbert throughout all this, like not taking him a ton in round 18. I mean, a couple things swayed me. The first one being, they just haven't added anyone else. They've not made a trade. They have it's like they seem fine with him. And the other thing is that Dak seems to be pretty high on him. I read an article the other day. Sean Siegel wrote an article for RotoViz about Jalen Tolbert, and one of the things he included in it was this quote from Dak where he's like, every year I take one of these guys under my wings. It was CD last year. It was Dalton Schultz the year before, where basically like the guy just comes over and runs routes with Dak all summer. Like he literally like stays at Dak's house and they just run routes in the backyard. And that was Jalen Tolbert this year. And that's not the most scientific analysis that you're going to find in the fantasy football space, but I believe in things like that. Like me personally, I totally buy into things like that. That's kind of the way I play the game.
If the living at a guy's house and running routes in his backyard narrative is strong, I also love the fact that they used premium draft capital on Jalen Tolbert. He was correct me if I'm wrong, he was a round 3 pick out of South Alabama. So this wasn't like some 7th rounder who's been sitting there for 2 years. He has familiarity with Dak. I think this could be the year. Brandon Cooks is old, and last year Brandon Cooks' quality of play slipped, even though Dallas was very pass happy. So this could be the guy. And again, he's super, super cheap. If we're wrong on Jalen Tolbert, you can cut him and add somebody on the waiver wire. It doesn't really cost you much at all of anything. One player that I'm very intrigued about the role is Brock Bowers. Everything indicates he's sort of going to be on the field in 2 tight end sets continually. Michael Mayer also is a guy that is kind of sneaky, especially for best ball as a late pick. But Mayer being out there next to Bowers, you have to think that Mayer is going to be the one who's going to be doing a lot of the blocking. Bowers, they're lining up in the slot. They've lined him up at fullback. They're just lining him up everywhere. And there's been a lot of talk from this coaching staff about getting him the ball and utilizing his yak ability. Just how highly can he finish at the tight end spot, Davis?
He can finish tight end 1. I mean, really, he can. I think he's got like a 90 catch, 1,100 yard, 10 touchdown season. I mean, those are insane numbers. But these are the 2 things that need to happen. The first one, you'd need Jacoby Myers to be woodshedded, basically, for like Jacoby Myers to be a 15% target share guy instead of a 22% target share guy. I don't think it actually necessitates anything happening to Davante Adams. I think Davante Adams can be who he always was, and basically the entire passing offense is Brock Bowers and Davante Adams. And you also need a commitment from the coaching staff to get Bowers layups. If they don't care about that at all, if they're like, Bowers, you just run your normal tight end routes, you go be advanced Michael Mayer, then he's going to be, 9.7 PPR points per game, and it'll be completely fine. But the stuff that I saw from him in the first preseason game, I was like, that is not how they are treating it. They are treating it like we took Brock Bowers at 13 for a reason. We don't want to get fired. We want Brock Bowers to get a bunch of stats so that we look good. He ran in the first preseason game, he ran one route from like outside, like as a flanker, like at like the X, like all the way on the outside. He ran one route from the slot. He ran 2 routes from inline and a route from the backfield. I mean, and the backfield play was a really cool play too, where it was a play fake to Zamir White. I don't remember if it was a Minshew or AOC in, and then the quarterback bootlegged, and basically Bowers was wide open in the flat, like no one within 15 yards of him. I was like, if they do that once a game, it's like this guy is scoring so many free points. It was good, the type of free points that Kyle Pitts never got, basically.
And we are, breaking the glass ceiling. Like Sam Laporta broke it last year. So it's this tight end, Brock Bowers was a way better prospect than Laporta or Kincaid were. So for Davis to throw out 90 catches, like my projections for him, I did an article in The Athletic. I had him at like 75. So I'm right there. And I'll say that the one scenario for him absolutely going nuclear and winning leagues this year, besides just being really good at football, is you brought up Davante Adams. This season could go really south for the Raiders in terms of wins and losses. He gets traded to somebody else at the trade deadline. you see Brock Bowers down the stretch as the number one target on Vegas, and he's just like Evan Engram was last year, or David Njoku in terms of usage, and just goes nuts. So lots of scenarios for him to hit at ADP, and he still sort of remains a value. You referenced in NFFC that he's a 10th rounder, but in FFPC, you're talking about a guy you still get in like the 6th round, even with the tight end premium. So big time upside there. Let's talk a little bit about the Broncos, because when I asked you to send me some guys you saw as risers, you put Bo Nix, which was sort of the obvious one. He looks great, but you also talked about his teammates. So talk a little bit about your enthusiasm for Bo Nix, and also which Broncos should be part of our draft plan. Is this you being back on Javonte Williams, or are you looking to spread it out with several Broncos?
Several. So, I mean, I think Javonte, Jaleel, and I think Estime, weirdly. So this is probably a hot take, but I think Estime is also a riser, even though he's not going to play at all to start the year. Like, there was maybe this hope, like, oh, Estime will come in and he'll be the goal line guy. That's not going to happen. But he's now like a super contingent guy because he was so good in pass pro. Like, all the nerds this morning were like showing all the clips of him just absolutely stonewalling Packers guys in pass pro when Stidham was the quarterback. So that gives him outs to be the 3rd down back if either guy gets injured. So, like, let's say Jaleel gets injured. That means that, oh, like, we've just got this great, Samaj P. Ryan plus clone. Because I don't think P. Ryan's going to make the Broncos. If P. Ryan makes the Broncos, I'll be wrong about Estime.
Well, be careful, Davis, because you don't want P. Ryan out on the open market. P. Ryan could be a guy who could hurt some of your running back targets. So
I know.
You want him on that Broncos roster.
No, ultimately, I've decided the absolute best thing to happen for Samaj P. Ryan is for Samaj P. Ryan to go to the Buccaneers, and to just, if I got to sacrifice a little bit of Bucky Irving bags, then whatever. Totally fine there. Just don't go. No, not Cincinnati. Anywhere but Cincinnati.
Dallas. Have him go to Dallas.
Have him go to Dallas.
I'll throw out Kansas City would be an interesting one in division, and sort of like we're kind of doing mental gymnastics on, guys like Steele, guys like Deneric Prince.
Yeah,
Samaj could just fit in right there.
They would love to have him. Absolutely. They really would. Like, he would be, he's like McKinnon, but shittier, but that's fine, honestly. And everyone's leaving Marvin Mims for dead. I'm not. I think that Sean Payton is like a donkey, kind of, but he's also like a great coach who's gotten some great production out of like pretty middling players. I think he will watch Tim Patrick and Josh Reynolds and these guys play for a while, and he'll be like, you know what? It literally is the same thing that happened last year. Like, Mims would earn some playing time and then do something. Remember when he just kept fumbling? There was like 3 games.
The Jets game was the one. The Jets fumble killed him. That was the one that killed him with Peyton, because they lost the game because of that fumble.
Yes. So let him watch Devon Vele play for a couple weeks, and then we'll be like, all right, Mims, let's get. Everyone is completely buried Marvin Mims, and I'll probably be wrong, but really, just the thing is like Bo Nix as a best ball guy now, what a great 17th round pick he's going to be.
Yeah, no, for sure. Bo Nix also looks like the kind of guy that's going to burn some dynasty managers. People sitting with like 112 Bo Nix shares in their rookie drafts. He just looks the part, and we talked about it in like the summer earlier about how it's sort of the perfect system for him. But I think people sort of discounted what a good runner he is. So he's got a little bit of a rushing floor. He's just very interesting player because he's older. He's going to step right in, and everything's sort of set up for him to beat expectations and be like a mid QB2 level production. So definitely an interesting one. Let's stay in the AFC West, because J.K. Dobbins is starting to creep up people's draft plans. You're starting to see like 11th round J.K. Dobbins. There's a convergence of him and Gus Edwards in certain formats where people are just taking him ahead of Gus. Even though you might bet on Gus to score the most points on the Chargers, it's like any week that J.K. Dobbins is healthy, he could be a guy you actually want in your lineup. Would you agree with that assessment?
That's exactly it. I mean, that's why, like, I would take J.K. Dobbins ahead of Gus Edwards right now, because, yeah, Edwards will probably be available for more games and will be like, more consistent or whatever. and you might only get 7 games out of J.K. Dobbins before he's out for the year or he gets re-injured or whatever. But what's become clear to me is that I'm pretty sure the team just thinks he's the starting quarterback or the starting running back. Like they're just like, oh yeah, like we signed him to do this and he is going to do it. And if that's what they think, then Gus Edwards is, he's number 2 in the NFL in yards per carry per attempt, behind only Devin Achane for players with 100 or more carries. So he's got some ability. And I don't know about you, Theo, but like my kind of idea was he's just not going to be healthy, like at all. He's going to be on the PUP list. Kind of like I thought he was going to be the same as Chubb. And like every day it's like, nope, he's just healthy. He's just our starting running back. Like he's first through all the drills. And I'm like, am I crazy? This guy tore his Achilles 10 months ago and he's just healthy. Like that's crazy. He got $50,000 guaranteed. I mean, it's insane, but that's where we're at.
And just a sort of a mental exercise that, if you're which Charger would you draft? It's Dobbins was considered to be 7 rounds ahead of Gus Edwards pretty much anytime we had them on the same Baltimore backfield.
Same team.
With Greg Roman as the offensive coordinator and Harbaugh's brother as the head coach. So as strange as it is, I think Dobbins might be the guy who ends up being the best ADP value on the Chargers. And he sort of was left for dead. But this is a team where they don't really have anybody on offense, and they're going to run the ball. Dobbins went a ton. So I think I'm in on Dobbins. I drafted him last night, and I've been kind of cramming him in, trying to play catch up on Underdog. I totally brushed this one aside earlier in the summer. I think I might have been wrong, and I would love to trade some Gus Edwards shares for Dobbins shares right now. But it's strange times. We might have a bounce back season. We might get the J.K. Dobbins season we wanted out of him like the last 2 years in Baltimore. This year in LA, left for dead in the double-digit rounds. He could be a really impactful player in this system. Let's talk about Jayden Daniels, because I threw him on the list, and obviously he's a guy that I'm sure you like. But just how highly would you draft him? Because we're starting to see him where you don't get that discount anymore. He's going ahead of Joe Burrow now, going ahead of Jordan Love now. And sort of once you see the CJ Stroud, the Anthony Richardson, and the Kyler Murray group gone, you're starting to see Jayden Daniels pushed up into that range. How comfortable are you with drafting him as like QB9? You think that's correct?
Okay, here is the issue with taking Jayden Daniels. I think Caleb's going to be better than him. Like I think not for real football. I mean, yes, for real football, but also for like fantasy scoring. Like Caleb is not a 0 as a rusher. He's not going to run as many times, but like, would you be surprised if Caleb ran for more yards than Jayden Daniels on like 50 less attempts? I mean, it's totally like Caleb is like a really good open field runner. The thing that would limit it would be as if the coaching staff doesn't want to, but you got to remember, Matt Eberflus does not want to get fired. Matt Eberflus really would prefer not to get fired. He I am sure came within a absolute hair. I'm sure that the Bears ownership called him in and they said, like, this is maybe going to happen. We are thinking about it. And you know what is a great way to not get fired? To let your young star quarterback do the things that's going to help you win games. And Caleb running instead of throwing it away or taking sacks. I mean, that's what, like, you got to go back to him at Oklahoma. He was kind of viewed as like not a running quarterback, but like more in the Kyler Murray mold than people are viewing him. Like 700 rushing yards a year, 5 rushing touchdowns, like kind of like what Kyler has done. And then he goes to USC, and I am sure he and his dad were like, hey, Cliff, no more of this read option. Like, I want to throw the ball. I don't really want to get tackled. But that's not going to fly in the NFL.
Yeah, I think both of them are strong picks, and I think both of them will finish as QB1s this year fairly easily. I do think the pathway for Daniels on the ground is going to be a little easier to get there because I think you are going to have a ton of manufactured ones, but opportunistic scrambling Caleb Williams coupled with he's going to break
Williams
the record.
Might throw 15 more touchdowns than Jayden Daniels. Like he might throw 1 more touchdown per game than Jayden Daniels, maybe even more, really.
Yeah, and that's one player that so we're on both of these rookie quarterbacks. I think we don't even need to really dive into it. This is sort of a ball doesn't lie thing. Like, even if you're apprehensive to draft these rookie quarterbacks, they stand out on an NFL field and they look so ready to go. It's not even really worth talking about here. But one
Yeah.
player where I was higher on this guy when we podcasted maybe end of June, early July, and one player that I was a little bit higher on than you were was Terry McLaurin. I presented the Terry McLaurin could be this year's DJ Moore. Now you hear a million people saying that. Obviously, they didn't copy me, because it's an educated thing there where a big quarterback improvement, and you get a wide receiver who sort of has never had a wide receiver one season get there behind a young and dynamic quarterback. Last year with Justin Fields, now with obviously with Jayden Daniels. Does the concerns Washington has at the wide receiver 2 and wide receiver 3 spot make you want to take Terry McLaurin a little bit more and play catch up here? Davis, are you still on he's a purgatory value, not necessarily a guy you're interested in?
So it's like completely in a vacuum, not related to any player he's being drafted around. Do I like Terry McLaurin? Absolutely. Would I want to have zero Terry McLaurin in best ball? Absolutely not, because I want to have like some Jayden Daniels. Like, I want to have like Bijan Robinson, Terry McLaurin, Jayden Daniels teams. Like, that's super fun. But McLaurin goes right next to all three of the Chiefs wide receivers and Kyle Pitts and Kenneth Walker, and like just guys who are like huge priority targets for me, like guys who I want to have like 20% of. And I don't know. I don't think Terry's that good. I really don't. I think he was like, and it's, you've been doing this for a long time. It's very hard to shake off prospect bias. Like, when a guy does not appeal to you as a prospect. It's like Terry McLaurin. He's one of these Ohio State guys where we get like no information because they don't run enough routes and they don't have to try in very many of their games. He was like 24 years old as a rookie. So it's just like, I'm just like, what do I do with this guy? I can't shake it. So it's like Terry McLaurin could totally be the reason I don't win this year, because Jayden Daniels is such a good deep passer. Like, Terry McLaurin could score like 13 touchdowns if he just runs hot on downfield targets. So I'm with you conceptually, but when I skip my skin in the game, I'm clicking the buttons answer is that I don't take that much of him.
That's fair. And it's funny because I was drafting him early on and I have dynasty exposure, but he has steamed up a little bit. And it's a lot of positivity, and a lot of people think I can get Terry McLaurin and I can get Jayden Daniels, sort of this discounted correlation play that's high upside. Let's talk about one of Caleb Williams' pass catchers, though. A guy who looks awesome is Rome Odunze. You couple that with I don't necessarily buy it, but the Keenan Allen weight gain. The guy's not 230. He's not 230. Like, he got weight on the wrong day. But he's old. And Odunze looks terrific. We're seeing him utilized in a number of ways. We saw him connect with Caleb Williams. This is a elite prospect in a elite draft capital. I know you preferred, obviously, Neighbors and Marvin Harrison Jr., but Odunze checks off a ton of boxes for immediate fantasy production. How highly should he be drafted?
I mean, I now have Odunze ahead of Keenan Allen in my rankings. There is a concern. The first one being the Bears are 40% 11 personnel usage in the preseason. That's very low. That is 32 out of 32 teams in the preseason. Now, does the preseason 1-to-1 to the regular season? Of course not. Teams are trying things out. I think the Jahan Dotson is an example of that. Like, Jahan Dotson is not going to play the slot when they get to the regular season. I don't think they're trying it out. But you have to ask yourself, well, who is that bad for? Is that Shane Waldron burying Rome Odunze the way he just buried JSN, another first-round rookie wide receiver? Or is it burying Keenan Allen, who's 32 years old, not playing well in the preseason, maybe is a little bit out of shape, who knows? There's a real galaxy brain take that Keenan Allen's like the best he's ever been was last year because the whole offense sucked. It's like, oh, if you build your offense around Keenan Allen, everyone gets fired. Not a great lesson for Shane Waldron and for Matt Eberflus to learn. I admit that it's probably a bit of me being a slappy, but I do prefer, at this stage, August 19th, I prefer Odunze to Keenan Allen.
Yeah, and I think you can make an argument that it's structural as well, because if you can get Odunze as like your wide receiver 4 That's a massive hammer to have in the second half of the season. I think he's going to be good out the gate, though. I just think it's going to be one of these situations where he might have spike weeks and then maybe a week you're not that excited about him. I think there might be a little bit of a lack of consistency, but in counting stats, I think he's going to be perfectly fine. Really, really, really good player. Let's talk about not a high draft capital guy, but a guy you're enthusiastic about is Greg Dortch. Talk about your enthusiasm for him. There's Michael Wilson backers, as he's the wide receiver 2 you want in Arizona. There's a lot of coach speak and a lot of Kyler speak on Greg Dortch, and obviously he's a guy who's been good down the stretch last year. But do you think this is something where it's going to be a seasonal bet? Is this more of a best ball bet for you? Where are you at with Dortch?
It's definitely more of a best ball bet because I think even Dortch's like 80th percentile outcomes, well, what does it really do for you and manage? I mean, not to say that you go into it's week 6 and you started with Justin Jefferson and you have Xavier Worthy as your second wide receiver, and maybe you took Keenan Allen and Keenan Allen has an ankle turn, so he's not playing. And you're like, oh shit, I would love to start Greg Dortch's 11.7 points. Like that sounds amazing. But I mean, can Greg Dortch be a league winner? Almost assuredly not. Marvin Harrison would probably have to get hurt, or McBride would have to get hurt. Now, that being said, I am super high on this Arizona team. I think that they were 8th in the NFL in yards per play with last year's team with Kyler. So like Hollywood Brown playing on 1 foot, Michael Wilson, day 2 rookie, like, Amari DiMercato prominently involved. I've always been a big Kyler guy, but yeah, I mean, he's a good 18th round pick for some teams, but much more of a best ball pick than a managed league pick, I think.
I think Drew Petzing is also going to be a guy whose name improves throughout the year. He's like a smart offensive coordinator. So yeah, it's just an interesting one with Dortch. I think taking shots on Wilson or Dortch, especially when you've had a Kyler Murray, Trey McBride, or Kyler Murray, Marvin Harrison Jr. team, I think those are both good ways of playing this offense. Let's talk about this rookie class at running back. And I'm sort of the opinion that we're going to get a lot of value out of drafting rookie running backs because there's multiple players in like ready to go handcuff situations. And all of these guys have a little bit of juice. So I'll ask you to rank these 3 guys: Braylon Allen, Ray Davis, or Bucky Irving, 1 through 3 in terms of your interest level of having them on your managed rosters.
Ray Davis, number 1, Braylon Allen, number 2, Bucky Irving, number 3. I think the issue is with Braylon. I actually think Braylon is like pretty clearly the best of them. Braylon Allen to me is like already the 18th best running back in the NFL.
Where would he be drafted if Dallas would have drafted him in the round 3 of the NFL draft?
Third round, like where like Pacheco goes, I think. Yeah, if the depth chart was Zeke, Braylon, and Rico Dowdle and Deuce Vaughn, I guess Zeke's presence he'd be a 5th round pick. He'd be where like James Cook goes, and I'd be taking him. I'd be taking him every time.
He'd be the highest drafted rookie running back in this class if he would have just pulled the trigger 20 picks earlier.
But the issue with Braylon and Bucky, they are just your classic roster cloggers where they are way too good to cut. You're like, wait, I'm going to cut Braylon Allen in week 9, and then Breece is going to miss week 10, and someone's going to spend 90% of their fab on him and be right to do it. Whereas Ray Davis, he's got injury outs, he's got standalone outs, he's got just plays better than James Cook, and the coaching staff gets pissed off at James Cook for ball security stuff, and like he's got lots of outs, and he also plays on the best team of those 3, where the Bills could lead the NFL in points. So it's definitely, even though I think Ray Davis is not nearly as good as Braylon Allen. Although I did actually think Ray Davis was a good prospect. I had him pretty high in my pre-draft stuff too.
Yeah, I think it's a season where you want to just keep clicking the button on those guys. And I will say that one guy I've been drafting now in like round 15, you're getting Marshawn Lloyd. Marshawn Lloyd's second half of the season, I'm very into him at that price.
Really good managed league pick, but it's the same thing where it's like, you got to just be ideologically committed to not dropping him because you are going to want to drop him in like week 3.
Yeah, and that's the case with a lot of these guys, and even with some of the wide receivers that you draft that are young, like we don't know when that spike week is, And you end up kicking yourself when you cut these guys, and then they end up being these huge waiver wire additions. So, and in FFPC, I'll say, like, if you cut Ray Davis or you cut Braylon Allen or Bucky Irving or Marshawn Lloyd, somebody's going to pick him up and just stash him. Trey Benson's starting to get pushed down into round 12 sometimes too with this.
Now Benson is kind of different. I think the market is wrong. I think he's going to, you're telling me Amari DiMercado and Michael Carter are going to play ahead of a third round, maybe for like a week.
Absolutely
maybe
not. Absolutely not. And your whole like outlook on coach speak and when James Conner is healthy completely changes when James Conner is not healthy. And I think right now the kind of another way to access this Arizona offense is you can double tap Conner and Benson if that's your RB2, and it's an easy way to play it. So let's finish this off. Last player we're going to talk about. This has been a guy you've been on for 6 months. No, maybe more. 9 months. Chase Brown. Chase Brown finishes as RB what, Davis? And where should drafters be selecting him?
He finishes as the RB 14, but he's got 6 weeks where he gets dusted by Zach Moss and gets like 6 carries and 4 targets. Like, he's going to be a little annoying. You definitely, it's not like drafting, like what we always kind of wanted Tony Pollard to be. Cause I don't think he's that good. I think he's good, but I think the market kind of has it about right now, right about running back 25, 26, 27 ish. You're still, counting Moss being there to be annoying. Although Chase Brown weighs 215 pounds. Like it's not a thunder and lightning thing where it's like, oh, only Zach Moss is strong enough to be in there. I think he's still a great pick. I think Moss is actually now priced appropriately too. So I've taken them both on a couple teams where it's like, I'll just, the Bengals backfield super valuable. But I'll leave the Chase Brown discussion with this. Joe Mixon finished as a running back 5 times as a Bengal. And I don't think anyone believes his production was because he's this great running back. I think a lot of it was very system-based.
125 combined targets to Joe Mixon and Samaje Perine last fully healthy year of Joe Burrow. So, yeah, Chase Brown, he's a fun one. But if you're listening to Davis, just take him in round 8. You don't need to, really, really reach up to grab him. Davis, this is a lot of fun. Let everybody know kind of what your in-season schedule is going to look like.
Still a little bit up in the air. Definitely there's going to be streams every day, pretty much. If you were subscribed to the Davis Mattek YouTube channel, there's going to be something. There will be a best ball portfolio review. There will be battle royale streams on Underdog. There's going to be a DFS program. And then there's going to be like a Sunday morning, basically lineups, DFS. Like I'll probably be live for like 2 or 3 hours on Sunday mornings, just going through all of the different permutations and all the stuff we've got going on. And, all the normal stuff you'd want from the Patreon, waiver wire, in-season rankings, weekly rankings, DFS plays, all of that good stuff.
Subscribe to Davis Mattek's YouTube channel and make sure you're following him on Twitter and following all of his content, and stick with us here at Press Coverage. We're going to try to cram in a couple more episodes before opening kickoff. We're almost there.